And
nothing's going to change that. And I say, well, why don't you put some things in place where people will be willing to patronize you on a regular basis? And most people can't see it. And that's unfortunate. And, as we talked on the last call about the ownership mindset versus the entitlement mindset, I spoke to some kids on Saturday, some high schoolers. And I talked to them about what most people in society do. And I said, it's not just you youngsters. I say grown folks, too. We buy what we want, and we expect everybody else to take care of our needs. And I say, y'all have seen it with some of your classmates. For Christmas or whenever that was, they were lining up outside to get the new Air Jordans, $200 tennis shoes. And I have a sister who's in the school system. She tells me about these kids who come to school with the new Air Jordans on, but then asks, Miss Freeman, do you have a pencil? Something's wrong with that mindset. And so the parents, unfortunately, are not able to educate the kids on the ownership mindset because they have an entitlement mindset as well. And it's unfortunate. Everything that we look at nowadays has been put into place for us to depend on government to take care of us, or somebody else to take care of us, or the church to take care of us. And we don't know what it is to take care of ourselves anymore. The American dream is not predicated on, buying the biggest house you can afford and, the nicest vehicles you can find. The American dream was built upon entrepreneurship, owning business. Because if we go back even before the turn of the 20th century, everybody owned business or were learning a trade from somebody who was in business so they can go into business for themselves. There was no such thing as an employee back then. But look at what has happened in the last 100 plus years. And people think that's the right way to go. And talking with my dad recently, he told me, and he was an employee, he was a government employee for a great number of years. And he told me the other day, he say, son, he say, I hate to say this, he say, but things are a lot worse for y'all. He say, a job ain't going to cut it. And how many parents are going to be willing to share that with their kids when society keeps telling them, go to school, get a job, so you can get a good education? And it's not happening for whatever reason. I think it has a lot to do with disciplining ourselves to say, hey, I want to do something better. Each generation is supposed to do better than the previous generation. And when my dad is saying it's going to be worse off for y'all, that ought to open some eyes. And so we don't have the ownership mindset because ownership requires discipline. It requires responsibility. And so a lot of people will miss that. And one of the things Heidi asked me to talk about as well was Black Wall Street. It was around in the early 1900s. And in 1921, Black Wall Street was burned to the ground by, jealous people from the other side of the fence. And the KKK, they collaborated and burned down Black Wall Street. And I think over 3,000 blacks died in that whole situation. Now, during that time, the early 1900s up until 1921, there were 600 businesses in Black Wall Street, black businesses. And most of history doesn't even teach this anymore. There were 21 churches, there were 21 restaurants, 30 grocery stores, 2 movie theaters, a hospital, a bank, a post office, several schools, several libraries, a law office, and a bus system. These were all owned by black people. And like Heidi mentioned earlier, money changed hands in the black community at that time between 36 to 100 times. And with it changing hands that many times, it took almost a year for that money to ever leave that community. And in 1995, it said it took 15 minutes for money to leave the black community then. Now, I heard a few years ago that in the Asian culture, their money changes hands 7 times before it leaves the community. In the Jewish community, it's 5 times. In the Anglo community, it's 3 times, and in the black community, it doesn't even change hands with each other.
Wow.
That's a sad testament. And what we need to realize, what we're doing with our dollars, is we go to work, we bring that money home, and we pay our bills. And as soon as we finish paying our bills, we go out to other communities and do our shopping. We've given all of our economic power to other communities and wonder why our communities are suffering. And so we have to break that mindset and start to empower our communities. You know, even though Black Wall Street was burned down, if we had the mindset to do it once, we can do it again. And so as a business owner, especially if you're going to do business in the black community, we've developed this distrust of one another as far as doing business. And so in the black community, we have to start developing some trust again with one another. And we don't do that. You know, we believe everybody else's stuff is better than ours. Now, I'll give you some instances over here of businesses I just won't patronize. There's a hardware store in my area, black-owned. When I walk in, the store is dirty, it's dingy, it's filthy. And the owner curses like he's a sergeant at boot camp while you're in there shopping. And, you know, I want to support your business, but I'm not going to accept that behavior when I'm giving you my dollars. The auto parts store around here, you know, there are several guys hanging outside. You come out of the store with your windshield wipers in your hand and let me do that for you. No, I got it. And, you know, the business owners and the managers need to come out and say, hey, you know, this is a place of business. You can't do that up here because you're running our customers away. And as
when you're talking about, when you're talking about, you know, black-owned and black-operated businesses, are we as black business owners being trained properly to handle our businesses? You know, some of us are online, but for those who have storefront businesses, are they, you know, taking examples from where they used to shop before, or, you know, are they being trained, or do they just open up a business, and if it goes well, great, and if it doesn't, you know, they just lost money because, you know, they had to close the business because it wasn't making money? Is there a way that, you know, black-owned and black-operated businesses can get trained to, you know how to handle their businesses better, you know, even if it's how to clean up, how to open a store, how to close a store? Where do we get that training?
Well, see, and that's one of the plus things about, and you don't have to work for a black-owned business to learn these things. I started out my first job in retail, but my first job, truth be told, and all of our first jobs should have been being trained at home. You know, my dad owned, and he still does, he owns a lawn service. I was taught how to cut yards at a young age. I was taught how to clean house at a young age. I was the only boy in the house with 3 sisters. I was taught how to clean. I was taught how to wash dishes. I was taught how to wash clothes. And so that's why I say when we're talking about going into business and when I talk to people, it's all about getting the mindset proper. We should be taught these things at home, and that's part of when you go and find a job. And if you have business, you should be providing jobs for the community when you have a storefront. And you need to be teaching your employees what it is to provide great customer service. You need to let your employees know, hey, it's not above you or beneath you to sweep the floor. It's not above you to make sure the restrooms are clean. You know, we have to let these people know I have high expectations, even though I might be paying you $5, $6, $7 an hour. This is what's expected of you. And so when we learn these things at a younger age, we can take these same practices and give them to our own business. And as I mentioned on the last call we had, find your mentor. That's very important. Find somebody that's willing to share something with you. Go offer to work, you know, even though it might be minimum wage for this person so you can learn some things about business ownership. But if you don't have people in the community that's building business and everybody's thinking about a job, it's going to be hard to learn a lot of things as far as running a storefront. And I think the qualifications need to be such that, okay, if you haven't worked in this industry, you know, you're going to make minimum wage until you learn some skills, which is what minimum wage is for anyway. A minimum wage job is to teach you some working and marketable skills to go somewhere else. You're not supposed to be on minimum wage all your life, as I hear a lot of people complaining about, it's hard for me to make it working for minimum wage. Oh, you should have learned some skills within the first couple of years and moved on. And so a lot of these things need to be taught at the home level, but if they're not, you need to find a job where you can learn these things. And if you see yourself struggling, you need to find somebody that you can ask some questions. This is what I'm dealing with right now. I don't know how to handle it. Do you have some suggestions? And we have to put our egos aside a lot of times to ask questions. Most men especially don't want to let another man know they're struggling in an area. I don't have a problem with that. This is what I'm dealing with. What do you suggest? I don't mind asking questions. You call me whatever you want to, but I'm going to ask questions. And so when you, like you said, a lot of us are doing business online, it cuts out a lot of those type things. But for those who have storefronts, it's some common sense, even though that's kind of a lost art today, common sense. But we go on and we say, hey, what can I do to improve? And that's one of the things, and it's not just a black-owned business, it's just owning business, period. If you go into one of these larger chains, you see there's a different standard of doing business than when you walk in a smaller store. Now, there's a place here in Texas called Fredericksburg. It's like small town USA, old school stuff. There's a different caliber when you stop in one of their stores if you're riding through that town going to West Texas. And we have to take the same mindset that I want to make sure my place is always clean. I want to make sure my employees are always friendly because I want people to patronize me and I want them to tell people about my business so others will come from other places to patronize my business. But when we allow our young men, and, like I said, I don't ever talk to hurt anybody's feelings, but when you allow young men to come and interview with you and they have earrings in their ear and their pants are hanging down and you're looking at their underwear and you hire that person anyway, you're already setting low standards for your business. And I don't apologize for that. You have to have certain standards that you abide by, and don't hire these people. Now, you might tell them, hey, go home and change and come back and talk to me. When I went years ago when Ecker Drugs was still around, and I knew I was going to be making $3.50 an hour, I went in a shirt and tie, and the person that was interviewing me was a Little League football coach that I had. So if anybody could have went in dressed any kind of way, it should have been me. But I knew I was going to interview for a job. And he taught me a lot of the skills, marketable skills that I use now today to run my own business. And so we have to start building business and start training our youth what it takes to run a business. And even though those of us that do business online, we still know what it takes to run a business. If either one of us set up a storefront, there are certain things we're going to accept and not. We're going to reject some things. We're going to accept some things. This is what I expect in my company. Are you willing to abide by these rules? And if the answer is no, well, I'm sorry. You're going to have to go look elsewhere. We've set our standards too low for the most part. And we have to raise our standards once again. And like I said, we need to find somebody to mentor us. We need to find out what it takes. And
Myran, you belong to a mentoring organization, right?
No, I don't belong to a mentoring organization at all.
What is the organization that you work for where you go and speak to the schools?
Oh, that's just my motivational speaking business.
So tell us a little bit about that, and how do you see the children receiving that message?
Well, high schoolers and middle schoolers are going to be key at first and foremost. And with this past event on Saturday, one of the things I always start off a talk with, I ask the kids a question. I always ask them, when you had a lot of other alternatives to hear somebody else, why did you choose to hear Myran? And, they always tell me. And this Saturday, when I asked them that, a few of the kids kind of hesitated. And I say, well, I don't get emotional. I'm not going to get upset if you tell me the truth. Tell me, why did you come to hear me? Well, our first choice was booked full, so you are our second choice. say, well, that's fine. I say, hopefully I can leave you with something today that you're going to be able to benefit from. And in most cases, half of the students are listening and half are not. You know, some go to sleep on you, some are texting. You know, that's just the nature of the beast.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sorry, go ahead.
What percentage of them do you think receive the message and actually want to go out and get a paper route or start cutting lawn like you grew up doing? Do you see that there's some enthusiasm for that once you explain to them that they can have financial power?
Well, when we look at the percentages, I would say anywhere from 15 to 25% receive that.
Mm-hmm.
And most of them are rejecting the whole thought process. My mentor, I spoke with him about it the other day, and he asked me, he said, what's the title that you use when you speak to the kids? I say, empower yourself for success. He said, well, it's two words in there that's scaring them. He said the word empower and the word success. And I can tell what kids are really receiving information because those kids are more interactive with me than the rest of them. The rest of them are there listening, and after each session, some kids will come up and ask me questions. And most of them haven't been taught that you can own a business, because that's one of the things that I ask as well. How many of you have heard go to school, get a good education so you can get a good job? And all the hands always go up. How many of you don't plan on going to college? And I get a few hands, and I'll ask, what do you plan on doing? And, you know, most of them are going to choose a military career. And so we have to start breaking that mold, that mental mold, and get our adults to stop telling our children, you know, the only thing you can do is have a job. And you do have some kids. I've actually had some kids come up to me afterwards and say, well, Mr. Jones, I'm doing computer repair on my own and things like that, and they share with me what type of businesses they're running. Now, not too many of them are going to volunteer like I did and, you know, walk the street with my lawnmower and ask people to cut their yards. They're not too interested in manual labor nowadays.
Right.
But, you know, I do get kids come up to me afterwards and say they're doing some things, and I asked even Saturday, you know, how many of you plan on owning your business? And out of the room I might have had maybe 5% raise their hands. Now, this conference is Future Business Leaders of America. And only 5% of the kids raise their hands as far as owning a business, but they're going to be our business leaders.
Right.
And so the percentage is real small, because when you don't have anybody in your family, anybody in your circle of influence that is talking about business, it's kind of hard for you to think outside the box, especially at that age level, because anything you do that's contrary to what everybody else is doing is going to be mocked. And so a lot of our kids are afraid to say, you know, I don't plan on going to business. I want to go to college. I want to start my own business. Or, you know, I don't want to go listen to Mr. Jones' speech because, you know, I'm not thinking about what he's talking about. You know, and the event that they wanted to go hear was, the title of it was What's Your Flavor, where they were going to do some personality skits and things like that. And I told the kids, I say, well, if I was in high school, I probably wouldn't have listened to me either. But, you know, we have to get our kids to understand that all the powers and ownership, I'm not going to be able to do it in a 60-minute segment. They're going to have to reach out to me like some kids have and stay in constant communication with me, because if you continue to be bombarded with go to school, get a good job so you can get a good education, and you only hear me one time out of the year, I'm going to be a distant memory unless that individual has a strong mindset, even at a young age. Even with that being bombarded to me, I always want to own my own business, even though that's what my parents and my teachers in society was telling me. And so, yeah, it's going to be hard, you know, mentally. And that's why I say whenever I'm talking to people about business, I'm always talking about the thought process first. Because you can jump into business. Anybody can start a business. But if the mentality mentality is not proper, it's not going to succeed. You have to be disciplined, and that's why I constantly talk about the thought process that we need to have as far as business ownership is concerned. And when you look at back in the late 1800s to the turn right around 1900, we went from 4,000 businesses in 1 year to over 50,000 as far as black-owned businesses were concerned. And we took that and we really fought to own business back then, and we fought for it for the next 60 years because we said, okay, we've been given an opportunity, and, we're not expecting anybody to go out and create it for us. We're going to go create it for ourselves. And there are a lot of men and women in history who started their businesses back then. And we had a couple of situations that actually hurt us, in my opinion. And you go back and look at history, and, most of you might feel the same way. And those two situations were the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and affirmative action. And I know, I have a lot of people biting my head off when I talk about those issues, but, put it together. We were striving in business. We were growing businesses every year, and we were patronizing one another. Like I talked about, with Black Wall Street, how many times the money changed hands. And we were fighting to make sure each one of our businesses made it. Our families got involved in business with us and made sure, okay, if Myron's not here today, I'm going to run the business for him until he gets back. And so most families, the average size black family had 5 kids. And you had some that had 10 or more. And those were the employees, believe it or not. And so we fought for one another to make sure each one of our businesses thrived. Even during Black Wall Street time, there were only 2 airports in the whole state of Oklahoma. And there was 6 blacks who owned private airplanes during that time. So there was wealth being created as well. And when the Civil Rights Act was signed, we said, okay, now we're equal. A piece of paper have given us equality. And so now we can stop doing business with each other because now the law has said that we can go and do business and spend our money with these other folks. And so once we took the money out of the community and started spending it with other folks, our businesses started to suffer, and then they started to close down. And so you can go back in history and see what happened to most of the businesses that were thriving up until that act was signed. And then the second thing, as I mentioned, affirmative action was a system, and there are a lot of mixed views on that as well, where the government came in and said, okay, we're going to set aside 10% of all government contracts of black-owned and minority businesses. So the government has given us a right to compete with each other for a small piece of the pie. And a minority in the United States is everybody except the white male. And so that means the white female is a minority because she's a woman. So what these white males did was they placed their businesses in their wives' name, and they started getting the contracts, again, that was set aside for blacks. And we don't even understand that. So the system that was supposedly set aside for us actually was more detrimental to us than it helped us. And so we don't see these things, and we get mad at people that point it out to us. There's a lot of things out here that each one of us individually can do to build business. We just have to figure out what it is. I can't sit on the phone and tell you what your calling is, what your gift is, what business you should start. All I'm trying to do is prep the mindset to get you started in the right direction. Find your mentor. And unfortunately, a lot of times, finding a mentor is hard in the industry if you're trying to go in and become competition for them. Those guys don't really want to help you. But a person with a sincere heart is going to reach out that hand and help pull you up with them. And so at that same time, and I know people are probably not going to like this statement either, but affirmative action civil rights came about, and And that's when our political base started to shift as well. We went away from what we were doing politically because the politicians came in and promised us goodies, promised us entitlement program, promised to take care of us. And so we ate that up as well. And what we need to understand, we're not going to empower ourselves any kind of way through political means. We're going to have to earn enough money, build enough business, and collectively as business owners, when we empower ourselves with our dollars, we can dictate what our congressmen and women do in politics. But we keep thinking our power is in a political structure, and our power is in business ownership. And ownership is the key, and a lot of us don't understand that. We keep hearing about, we're going to take care of you. No. We're giving our money to other communities when we earn our paychecks, and a lot of us are giving it back to the same places that employ us and don't even understand that. But we're giving our money into other communities, and our communities are continuing to suffer, and we're running to our politicians and asking, what are you going to do for us? We need this. And they keep telling us that we're victims. And so we eat up that mindset, and just like with going to school, get a good education, once we keep hearing that somebody owes you something, what reason do we have to go out and fight for something? What reason do we have to go out and build something? We don't. And so a lot of us won't do it, and then we won't support each other in business. I'll tell you this. I'm not going to mention any names or tell you who it is. It's nobody on this call, but a family member of mine. In my multi-level marketing business, I virtually offer practically everything that you can buy at a store. And I had a family member tell me if I didn't give her the goods at my price, she wasn't going to support me. And so I told her, I guess you're not going to support me. What kind of mindset is that when I talked about earlier that the family was all about supporting one another, when you have a family member that tell you if you don't give it to them at your price, they're not going to support you. I don't know where we get that type of mindset from, but we'll still go and give our retail dollars to all the major chains out in the area and think nothing of it. We want to help others get successful versus our own family, versus our own friends. That's a bad mentality. And we have to stop a lot of these things in our communities. Stop not supporting one another. Because if we don't support each other, how can we expect others to support our business? And I think that's very vital to what we're trying to accomplish when we talk about entrepreneurship. And it's just bad. The mindset. And none of us are going to be able to build and sustain a business with a small group of people. Think about a doctor or a dentist or something like that. They're not going to be able to stay in business if the only people that they're, seeing at their doctor's office on a weekly basis are family and friends. You're going to have to expand out and market and promote yourself to others. You're going to have to do that. Because if I had a cousin that was a doctor, he can't operate on a different part of me every week. That's just not going to work. He's going to need to get out there and market himself and promote himself to others so that they know he's in business. We have to get into promoting ourselves more. We have to operate our business with such high integrity that other people are willing to promote our business to other people.
So, Tawana, what do you have to say about that? You're definitely doing a lot of marketing of your business.
I am. While Mr. Jones is talking, I'm marketing right now. I know you can hear me typing in the background. I am. Marketing and advertising is, super business minded. I mean, you have to, be on top of your toes. You can't, lag in it. It's an everyday process, especially when you have a new business, like myself. I worked for retail, for years, like Mr. Jones was saying, and, it was crazy. It's like, from one job to another, and, job in Alabama, we call it just over broke, and, you work paycheck to paycheck, and it's like, you get a whole different feeling when you're doing something for yourself and you're owning your own business. When I first went into business, it was for Fortune High Tech Marketing, and, as an independent contractor, was a little bit different. And I didn't start out, making a whole lot because I didn't know anything about marketing and advertising until I went back to college. And, I learned a little bit, but a lot of times I would learn from other people who had been in the business for a while. So, pretty soon it went from, $100, a week to $100 a day, and I thought, well, this is the way to go. It wasn't like on Friday I'm looking for that paycheck. It's like, I wonder how much money I got today, and, you go online, you look, and you're like, oh, cool, I can go, get whatever and do whatever and put more money back into the business and, help the charities out that I wanted to. So, when I started, it was a little different. It was in 2001, and in Alabama, business owners aren't very popular. It's, go to college, get a job, or go to college and marry somebody with money so you don't have to worry about it, and that's what they teach you. And so like Mr. Jones was saying, you have to get in a different mindset, and, you have to want it for yourself. You have to have drive and determination. I think a lot of times, people not necessarily don't lack it, but they just direct that determination in, let's get a job, and, they don't think I can find the money to own my own business or, I can do it. And a lot of times, too, and I learned this from selling Mary Kay, and, it's funny to say, but you have to have, a good support system. If you have people, in your life that go, oh, God, you've never done anything in your life. You're not going to own a business. I mean, if you do, you're going to just waste your money, just go get another job. Those aren't the people who you need to be associating with. And that goes into another thing that he brought up before, is finding a good mentor. Even if your support system is just one person, as long as they're not a dream killer, you're headed towards the right direction. So I think I'm agreeing so far. Everything, Mr. Jones said so far is, right on the money. For me, it just took getting out of that mindset and wanting something for myself instead of being dependent, on everybody else. So kudos.
Nice. So, Mr. Jones.
Yes, ma'am.
I want you to talk a little bit about why you think that blacks won't patronize other black businesses. We know why historically, but are we seeing that same trend with younger business owners, or is that something that's being broken and people are finally starting to reach out to their brothers and sisters when it comes to doing business?
Well, the good thing about our younger folks is they disrespect all the old rules that we've lived by in the past. We, like I mentioned earlier, when the Civil Rights Act bill came through, we stopped doing business with one another. And so that created the type of environment to say, well, I can't trust my own people to support me.
But do you think that's changing now?
I think it's changing greatly with the younger generation. Generation X and Y, I believe, is what they call them now. But they're changing because they're not playing by the rules that we've established in the older generation.
So what rules? Explain that.
Well, when we talk about not trusting one another, we say they're not good at building relationships, but if you look at, medias like Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Orkut, and things like that, they're building, we don't feel they're building relationships, but they're building relationships on what we consider a shallow basis. Whereas when we wanted to build a relationship, we wanted to earn the trust of another person, and we wanted to earn their loyalty, where they're not looking at that. You gonna support me or not? That's how their mindset is, and we've looked at it as a way, they're not developing anything solid. But if you look at the guy who owns Facebook, this guy's a billionaire, and he's in his 20s, and nobody is saying that he doesn't have any relationship, solid relationships. And so we have to throw off a lot of these old mindsets about not trusting one another. And, unfortunately, most of us in the older mindset are still looking for what can I get out of the relationship. And these younger folks are saying, if you come in, you're going to do business with me or not. If not, I'm going to move on anyway. You can still be my buddy.
Right.
And so we have to, one of the things we don't like to do is change. And we've historically been blamed as not being able to do business with one another as far as time goes back. And we have to created the mindset that people can't trust us either when we do business, because when you hire a black person, a lot of times they come in, they either deliver inferior product or they deliver inferior service. We have to make sure we're still offering the highest quality product and service when we're doing business. And so you hear it all the time, I'm not going to get a black person to do this for me because they're going to half do it.
Right.
And so we have to get away from that mindset, but as business owners, we have to make sure, like I said, we're trying to operate our business with the highest integrity. I'm going to do this job better than anybody else they would have hired because I want to make sure they refer me later on to somebody else that might need the same work. And you can hire anybody else from a different race to come in, and they can do a substandard job as well, but you don't feel as bad as when your own people do it to you. Because you said, I wanted to give this business to the black guy or the black lady, and this is how they treat me in return. You don't want your own people to do you that way. And so we have to make sure we're delivering on what we promise. It's something I've always heard, being in business, we have to over-deliver and under-promise. We don't want to over-promise and under-deliver. So you don't want to come in and tell a person, I'm going to do this, this, and this. You let that person tell you what they're looking for. And then you say, okay, I can do that for you. And then when you do the job, you throw a little bit extra in for that person. Say, man, this guy really went all out for me. I'm going to make sure I promote him. And we have to come out of that mindset not to trust one another, because we've created in our own community with one another. And then you have, from the community side, we have to get out of the mindset when we see business being vandalized in our community, or we see somebody looking to break into that storefront, we need to pick up the phone and call the police right then and there. I'm not saying go address that person, but when you see things like that and you turn a blind eye to it, why would a business owner want to keep his business in your neighborhood and the people are not respecting it as well? We need to treat, even though we don't own the business, we need to treat it like we own it, because in essence, we all own it. And so when you turn a blind eye to it, the owner's saying, if the people in the community feel this way about my business, why should I keep my business here? So it's a bad situation on both sides, because the owner wants to do business there, and if they're trying to operate their business with the highest integrity and offering service above and beyond anything you could ever comprehend, but in turn you're allowing the criminal element in the community to destroy it, it's constantly costing the business owner more and more money. His insurance premiums are going up because the community doesn't care. And then you look at places like Detroit, Michigan, that's General Motors is there, but you visit that place and it's torn down because the people don't care, because they don't have ownership mindset. Act like it's yours, but respect that it belongs to somebody else.
So to wrap it up, what's the most important message that you want to get out to the adults so that they can pass on to their children? What's the number one thing you want parents to talk to their children about as far as developing an ownership mindset?
The most important thing. Well, I think it goes back to what I've been talking about the whole call. Developing the thought process, get out of the mindset of go to school, get a good education so you can get a good job, because none of those exist. We talk about good education. Who says what a good education is? We have to make sure we're telling our kids get the right education.
Get the right education, exactly.
Yeah, the right education is not being taught in the books, and unfortunately. I loved history, I loved economics, and even when I was in school, I would go to the library and rent books on economics. And so when I went to school and sat in class, I wasn't in line with the thinking that was coming from the book. And you take a student like me, we have to find out what the creative abilities are in our children. And we need to start steering those children in that direction versus the generic thought process, go to school, get a good education so you can get a good job. That's not what a lot of kids want to do. And like I mentioned the other day, they're getting rid of all of the vocational programs in the local school district here. Well, what about the kids who want to go in those vocations? we're leaving those out. So the parents have, in order to help the kids change their mindset, the parents have to change their mindset. And we have to, like my dad told me recently, son, you're not going to be able to make it on a job. You're going to have to do something different. Yeah, I know that.
That's right.
We need others to understand that. And others are not understanding that because, like I said, they figure it's too much risk. They don't have the money to get started in business. So it's a challenge. But anything repeated long enough, we can make it stick. But if, like I said, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Myran.
Well, I was just going to say, like when I talked to the kids the other day, they'll see me, they won't see me again probably for another 12 months. And the ones that are in the 12th grade won't see me again. But anytime I meet with children or students, I try to leave them some information and I leave them access to me. And I always make sure to tell them, don't go home and tell your parents Mr. Jones contradicting everything that they teaching you. I say, I'm just trying to help you gather a thought process so you can think about some things further along in life. But here's my information if you want to communicate with me. If you want to know what books I read, email me. If you have questions for me about business, email me or call me, however you want to do it. And a lot of parents, without their thought process are going to reject it if their kids tell them. But the parents that's open-minded and wish they would have started a business will say, okay, what did Mr. Jones say? Well, let us meet Mr. Jones. Let us talk to him a little bit and see what he's all about. And so, those are the individuals that are going to change this country and change our communities. It's not going to be everybody. We go back to when the United States was going to fight Britain. It was only 1/3 of the people that were willing to fight. And basically that's about what we're going to have now who are willing to fight for business ownership, about 1/3 of the people. And so I don't know if there's anything else I can say at this point as far as wrapping up and, an important point for the adults to take to their students, their children.
That was good. So parents heard that they need to start thinking about the right education, not just a good education when you're talking to your children about what they're going to do in their futures, and that success basically comes from a passion. Whatever your child has a passion for, whatever talent they have, look at that talent and believe in that talent and nurture that talent. And maybe sometime in the future we'll see this whole process turn around where young children are thinking of ownership instead of 4-year college degree and looking for a job. Thank you for tuning in today. We had a great time chatting with you, and we look forward to talking to you again next Tuesday on the Hyde Report.
You're welcome.
Talk to you soon, Myran.
All righty.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Tawana.
Good night.